There's a strange truth most men learn too late. The most important messages a woman sends are the ones she never puts into words. Desire rarely announces itself. It leaks. It shows up in timing, in pauses, in the way a room suddenly feels charged when nothing obvious has changed. Have you ever noticed how the moment she says, "I'm fine," the air says something else entirely? That's because attraction doesn't live in conversation. It lives in the nervous system, in anticipation, in restraint, in what is deliberately left unspoken. In the late 1950s, psychologist Leon Festinger uncovered the gap between what people claim to want and what their emotions actually pursue. That gap is where desire is born and where most men lose their footing. They focus on what's said, they miss what's felt. Then they're confused when intensity fades, when replies slow, when chemistry turns into politeness and emotional distance. Female desire isn't logical. It's pre-verbal, pre-cultural, older than social rules. For generations, women learned that openly wanting too much came with consequences. So attraction learned to hide. It learned to express itself through tension, through rhythm, through silence rather than declaration. If you can't read that language, you're always reacting, always a beat behind, always negotiating instead of leading. The Stoics understood something modern men forgot. Real power is quiet. It comes from perception, from inner stillness, from the ability to observe without rushing to fill the silence. A man who is internally ordered doesn't beg clarity from the world. He creates presence, and presence exerts gravity. Neuroscience later confirmed what philosophy already knew. Women don't respond most to comfort. They respond to controlled uncertainty. To a man steady enough to lead, disciplined enough to withhold, and calm enough to let anticipation build. Dopamine, craving, pursuit. The same circuitry that fires in the hunt, not romance. Craving. Biology isn't moved by politeness. It's moved by contrast, by polarity, by a man who knows when to advance and when to pause, when to give and when to make her wait. That's the difference between being desired and merely tolerated, between being chosen by instinct and kept by convenience. So let's go deeper, past the surface-level dating advice, past the polite lies, down into the psychology of the things women feel but will never put into words, not because they're deceptive, but because the moment these desires are spoken, they lose their charge. Some forces only work in silence. The moment you name them, you weaken them. There are behaviors that bypass logic and speak directly to the nervous system, primal switches, ancient cues, the kind that don't ask for permission from the conscious mind. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. The first is this: she wants to feel slightly out of control, not unsafe, not disrespected, but relieved of the burden of constant self-management. And most men misunderstand this. They think dominance means volume, pressure, force. No, that's insecurity pretending to be power. Real dominance is calm, grounded, economical. It's in the way you move through space like you already decided. In the way your hand closes around her wrist for half a second as you guide her through a crowd. In the way you say come instead of where do you want to go. And you don't ask for approval, you assume alignment. Here's what most men never consider. Women live in control all day. Decisions, social calibration, emotional regulation, performance, image, boundaries, expectations. By the time she's with you, her nervous system is exhausted from holding the frame of her own life. She doesn't want another meeting. She doesn't want another negotiation. She doesn't want another man who needs to be consulted like a committee. She wants to exhale, to feel that for a moment. She can surrender the steering wheel to someone who is steady enough not to crash. Psychology backs this up. Women are most aroused not when they feel in charge, but when they feel chosen. When they feel the object of focused, unapologetic desire. When they are being led into experience, not asked to design it. But here's the paradox. She can never ask for this. The second she has to say, "Take control," you already failed, because control that is requested is no longer control, it's obedience, and obedience kills polarity. What she wants is a man who reads the temperature of the moment, who senses when she's testing his frame, who doesn't collapse when she pushes, who doesn't get reactive, defensive, or explain himself into submission. A Stoic would recognize this immediately, not as ego, not as domination, but as inner sovereignty. The man who governs himself doesn't need to prove anything. He doesn't rush. He doesn't chase reassurance. He doesn't negotiate his core. He stands rooted like a pillar in a storm and lets the world adjust around him. That steadiness is what allows a woman to let go. Because only when she feels your center is unmovable does her nervous system permit surrender. And she won't thank you for it with speeches. She'll thank you with silence that lingers, with the way her eyes soften when she looks at you and realizes she doesn't need to be on guard, with the way her body relaxes when your presence says without words, "I've got this, you're safe to stop managing." 2. She wants you to stop asking for permission for everything. This one silently kills more attraction than rejection ever could. The constant negotiating, the endless, "Is this okay? Do you want me to? Should I?" Every question you stack on top of the moment drains tension. It turns desire into a committee vote, into a contract, into something safe and dead. Understand this. Women don't want a man who treats intimacy like a legal form that needs signatures on every line. They want a man who can read the room and move with certainty, not recklessness. Certainty. There's a difference. Psychologist Terry Connolly studied consensual power shift fantasies and found something most men aren't ready to hear. A large percentage of women are aroused by scenarios where they are not the ones directing the flow, not because they want harm, not because they want chaos, but because being desired so strongly that a man leads removes the burden of choice. It removes the fear of being judged for wanting too much. Choice is heavy. Leadership is relief. Now let's be clear. Consent is absolute, non-negotiable, but consent is not the same as asking for approval at every micro-movement. Consent is the foundation. Presence is the language. A grounded man doesn't run a verbal checklist. He watches her breathing. He notices the pause, the way her body leans instead of pulling back, the way silence stretches and invites instead of resists. He understands that attraction speaks through the nervous system, not through formal dialogue. This is where most men fail. They outsource their perception. They ask instead of seeing. They seek validation instead of trusting their own calibrated awareness. And here's where Stoicism cuts through the noise. The Stoic man is not reactive. He is not desperate for reassurance. He doesn't fidget for permission to exist. He is internally ordered. His mind is still, his emotions are disciplined, his presence is heavy and calm. Because he governs himself, he can lead others without force. That inner sovereignty is what makes a woman relax her guard. When you stop asking for permission and start acting from centered confidence, something changes. The dynamic shifts. She no longer feels like your instructor. She no longer feels like she has to guide, correct, manage, or mother the moment. She starts to feel like your woman. And that distinction is everything. So ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you led without looking back for approval? If you have to think about it, you already know the answer. 3. She wants you to push back when she tests you. And make no mistake, she will test you. Not because she's cruel, not because she wants drama, but because at a nervous system level, she needs to know if you're solid, if you're a man with weight, with structure, with a spine that doesn't bend the moment pressure is applied. Every woman, consciously or not, applies stress to a man to see what he's made of. A sharp comment, a cold tone, a sudden withdrawal, a challenge to your authority, a subtle disrespect wrapped in just joking. And most men fail right there. She says something cutting, he over-explains. She pulls back, he chases. She creates distance. He floods her with reassurance, apologies, emotional dumping. In that moment, something breaks. Not on the surface. Deep. Primitive. In the part of her brain that asks one brutal question. If he folds this easily with me, what happens when life hits him for real? John Gottman's research showed that stable couples aren't the ones without conflict. They're the ones where both partners hold their identity during conflict, where tension doesn't erase the man, where disagreement doesn't dissolve his center. Because when she tests you, she's not trying to win an argument. She's trying to see if you disappear. If you abandon your frame to keep her comfortable. If you sacrifice your truth for approval. If your masculinity is conditional on her mood, and if you do, she may stay, but she will never feel safe. Because safety to the female nervous system doesn't come from softness. It comes from stability under pressure. Here the Stoics were ruthless in their clarity. The untrained man reacts. The disciplined man remains. Not cold, not detached. Rooted. Like a mountain in a storm, wind can scream, rain can fall, lightning can strike. The mountain doesn't negotiate with the weather. So when she pushes, you don't snap back. You don't justify, you don't collapse. You don't try to be understood. You stay calm. You stay present. You hold your ground without raising your voice, without tightening your jaw, without shrinking. You let her feel that your center is not up for debate. That immovability, that quiet, unmovable core, that's what she's actually craving. Not conflict, not drama, but the certainty that you are a man who does not vanish under pressure. Because if you can stand firm with her, she knows, instinctively, you can stand firm against the world. Quick pause. If you've ever felt that women react more to what you do than what you say, go to the comments and write, "Silence speaks louder." Just that. I want to see how many of you actually recognize this in real life. 4. She wants you to remain a mystery. The slow death of desire begins the moment you become completely transparent. When she knows every thought, every fear, every childhood wound, every insecurity, especially in the first months. When there's nothing left to discover, nothing left to uncover, nothing left to wonder about. Desire needs space. It needs distance. It needs the unknown. Esther Perel explains this with brutal clarity. Fire needs air. Intimacy and erotic tension are not the same thing. The couples who keep desire alive are the ones who never fully collapse into each other. There is still separation, still edges, still something unreachable. Most men destroy attraction by trying to become safe too fast. They overshare, they confess everything. They turn themselves into an open diary, thinking vulnerability will buy closeness. But closeness without polarity is just comfort. And comfort without tension is friendship. And women don't fantasize about their friends. This doesn't mean you become cold or emotionally absent. It means you remain sovereign. You have an inner world she doesn't fully access. You have thoughts you don't immediately verbalize. You have goals, battles, ambitions that don't orbit around her moods. You are not psychologically naked all the time. Sometimes she asks, "What are you thinking?" And the most powerful answer is simply, "Nothing." Not as a lie, not as a game, but as a boundary. Because not every thought needs to be offered. Not every feeling needs to be exposed. Some things are yours. The Stoics understood this deeply. A man with inner order does not leak his soul to seek validation. He observes, he reflects, he contains himself. His silence is not emptiness, it is depth. And depth creates gravity. That slight distance, that quiet privacy, that sense that there is more beneath the surface. It keeps her curious. It keeps her leaning in. It keeps her invested. The moment you become fully predictable, fully readable, fully available, is the moment her nervous system relaxes too much. And when tension dies, desire follows. You become like furniture, useful, familiar, reliable, and invisible. 5. She wants you to put your mission above her. This is the one most men can't accept. because it sounds cold, because it sounds like emotional neglect, because Hollywood trained you to believe a woman should be your world. That lie has destroyed more masculine polarity than any rejection ever could. Women say they want your time, your attention, your constant availability. What their nervous system actually responds to is a man who has something bigger than them pulling him forward, a direction, a purpose, a path that existed before her and will continue with or without her. David Buss proved it in evolutionary psychology. Women are wired to be attracted to men with ambition, status, trajectory, not because of money, not because of comfort, but because ambition signals survival, power, competence. The ability to build, to lead, to navigate chaos. When you drop everything for her, when you make her the center of your universe, you don't look devoted, you look empty. She doesn't want to be your world. She wants to be invited into a world that's already moving. This is why men who are too available, too fast, too eager, lose attraction. They collapse their entire identity into the relationship. They shrink themselves to orbit her. And women are not attracted to orbiting men. They are attracted to expansion, to momentum, to a man in motion. When you tell her calmly, "I can't see you tonight. I've got work to finish," something shifts, not resentment, respect. Because now your time has weight. Now your presence is not guaranteed. Now she feels she has to qualify for access instead of assuming it. And that reverses the entire power dynamic. She starts investing. She starts wondering if she's doing enough. She starts leaning in. That's not manipulation. That's biology responding to value and scarcity. Most men sabotage themselves at the end of good moments. They linger. They stretch the date. They overtext. They try to squeeze every drop of connection out of the interaction. And in doing so, they drain the tension. Behavioral psychology calls it the peak end rule. People remember experiences by their emotional peak and by how they end, not the average. If you overstay, if the energy fades, if you're clearly trying to keep it going because you have nowhere else to be, that's what gets imprinted. Neediness, emptiness, lack of direction. But if you are the one who ends it while it's still charged, if you're the one who says, "I've got to go," when she still wants more, you leave an open loop in her nervous system. Desire doesn't grow in saturation, it grows in absence. Anthropologist Margaret Mead observed something ruthless across cultures. The one who controls separation holds power, not the one who clings, the one who can walk away first. This applies to everything: texts, dates, arguments, intimacy. The Stoics would call this inner sovereignty. A man who is not ruled by attachment, who is not pulled off his path by emotion, who values his purpose above comfort, above validation, above immediate pleasure, not because he is cold, but because he is ordered. And a man who is ordered inside becomes magnetic outside. So be the one who leaves first, not as a tactic, not as a trick, but because your life is genuinely calling you forward, and she will feel that pull every time. Here's the final truth they'll never say out loud. Women don't want you to ask them what they want. They want you to already know. Not because they're childish, not because they enjoy confusion, but because the man who has to ask is the man who hasn't yet developed perception, and perception is the real currency of attraction. You can't negotiate desire. You can't logic someone into craving you. You can't explain your way into being wanted. Attraction doesn't respond to arguments. It responds to embodiment. Most men are terrified of making the wrong move, so they make the worst move of all. They make no move. They become safe, predictable, over-calibrated, a version of a man that no one could criticize and no one feels drawn to. They smooth out every edge. They filter every impulse. They ask instead of sense. They wait instead of lead. And in doing so, they kill the very tension that creates desire. Because desire is born from polarity, from risk, from a man who is willing to stand in uncertainty without collapsing, a man who doesn't need consensus to act, a man who doesn't need reassurance to move, a man who doesn't ask the room who he's allowed to be. Every principle you've heard here requires something most men avoid: the willingness to stop performing and start being, to stop seeking validation and start generating gravity, to stop trying to be chosen and start choosing. The men who get this don't walk around loud. They don't posture. They don't perform dominance. They carry a quiet certainty, a settled core, an internal order. The Stoics called this ruling the inner citadel, a man who is not at war with himself, a man whose emotions are trained, whose desires are disciplined, whose presence is grounded. And that inner structure leaks into everything: how he walks, how he speaks, how he pauses, how he looks at a woman without needing anything from her. Not arrogance, not bravado, certainty. And certainty is rare. In a world full of men asking for permission to exist, the one who doesn't becomes instantly noticeable, instantly heavier, instantly unforgettable. She will never explain this to you. She can't. The moment it has to be verbalized, it loses its power. The moment it becomes a request, it stops being desire. But now you've seen the pattern. What you do with it is on you. You can dismiss it. You can rationalize it. You can tell yourself it's not true because it clashes with what you were taught. Or you can accept that attraction operates on a level most men never train themselves to perceive. And you can start living in alignment with that reality. The choice has always been yours. She's just been waiting to see if you were the kind of man who could make it. Before you go, I want you to do one thing. If any of these dirty truths about female desire matched what you've seen in real life, go to the comments and write, "She feels it, she never says it," just that line. I want to see how many of you have actually lived this, not just heard it. And now, if this video opened your eyes to how attraction really works beneath the surface, the next one on your screen goes even deeper into the psychology of power, desire, and the Stoic mindset that makes a man unshakable. Click the video that's appearing now and continue the journey. Make sure you're subscribed, hit the like button if this resonated with you, and stay sharp. This is the kind of knowledge most men never hear.